Kia ora. Welcome back to the Ins and Outs podcast. I'm Jemilah.
I'm Koen, and we're here to have casual and informative conversations about navigating the music industry in Aotearoa.
On this episode, we had a kōrero with Ngariki Muru about the ins and outs of a sustainable music career.
Ngariki is a full-time primary school teacher, a full-time musician, and describes himself as a music supporter. He's the frontman for the band Kaha, and he's co-written with a range of amazing artists around the Motu.
We talk about budgeting, funding, financial stability, finding your allies, and the importance of a good spreadsheet.
Let's get into it.
Kia ora, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Super happy to be back in the room again, and this time with Ngariki. Welcome.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Ngariki, can you tell us about yourself and who you are, this mysterious figure in the music industry that pops up everywhere somehow?
And knows everybody.
Yeah. I think one day I'm going to pop up in a way that's a bit more lucrative than what I'm doing at the moment, because I pop up in a lot of ways that don't make me any money. That's all good. I'm just here for the mates, really. This is my like how I make friends scheme that I've been doing for a while.
Yeah.
I am from Tauranga Moana. My whānau is Ngāti Ranginui, and I moved up to Auckland about 10 years ago. I've been doing music for 20 years, and I think the like defining feature of myself as a musician is that I'm a supporter. You know, I love to make music, and it's the kind of thing that makes my life worth living. But I think sharing that with others and getting really excited about what other people are doing is what keeps me in it.
That's your superpower, I think. Yeah, that's how I know you, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we mean with like somehow you know everyone in the scene.
Yeah.
And more than that, people that are up and coming, and I'll be like, oh, Ngariki, I found this new artist. It's like, yeah, I know that one.
I think that's like this special thing, because people who are at a certain level sort of just get attention sort of regardless from people. People know who they are just because they're at a certain level. But to be someone that cares and looks out for and discovers people at the very beginning level is so appreciated. Like as an artist, that's really special to have people that at a foundational level, just a stranger who's like, leading is rad. Yeah.
I'm lucky too, because for me, I'm just doing what I love. I love getting to hear other musicians and what they're doing, and especially getting to know them and why they're making what they're making.
Yeah.
That stuff just brings joy to me.
Yeah.
It is pretty special. It's funny because, you know, the whole podcast here is like, let's dive into the industry, but like this, it's easy to forget that it's actually an art form and such a joyous experience of making art and music. And absolutely.
Yeah, I think the industry can be like like a word that people feel like has to have a really specific definition. But to me, the music industry just means everything surrounding music.
Yeah.
In a sense, like from the musician to the media people to the listeners, you know, each participates in quite a different way.
Yeah.
And everything contributes to like what I would define as the music industry, I think.
I like that word.
Yeah, I think so. That's kind of how I think of it in relation to this podcast. It doesn't, you know, a career in the music industry doesn't particularly mean that you are going to be working like in a big firm or anything. You know, people sometimes think of industry as those
big
things.
labels,
it just
the big
means that
dogs.
someone asked me once, like, oh, so what makes you feel like you're part of the industry? I'm like, oh, I don't think you have to do anything extravagant to be part of the industry. If you care about music and are involved in music in some sense, I think you can call yourself part of the industry.
Totally.
Yeah. And especially in music, or I suppose a lot of art works that way, where the people that are involved in making things work aren't usually all in one place. Like it's not a factory.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
Imagine,
and you just like, you stand at the line and then the song comes past and you listen to it and then it goes on to the next one.
The next engineer goes to the master. It's not quite straight.
Got the secret sauce.
Yeah. Well, I guess in this particular episode, I mean, we can obviously keep talking about musicians in the scene for days, and maybe that's another episode where we're bringing you back. But today, it's really cool to talk I think about the cogs that make the machine work. I suppose the stuff that
business
funds
side
the
of
art,
things.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's all fun and games until you don't have any money anymore. And so there's a lot of different, sort of revenue streams for artists that artists should probably know about to maximize their potential at this,
At a
try
foundational
at a
level.
career sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I mostly want to ask what in your mind does a sustainable career in the music industry look like?
I think that for me, I'm quite fortunate because the way that I describe it is that being a primary school teacher is my full-time job. And then being a musician is another full-time job that doesn't pay me as well. And I know that there are a lot of musicians out there who are just doing the music, just doing that full-time, and making that work is a lot more difficult than what I'm doing. But in some ways, I wish that I was doing what they're doing, really, because the music is just what I love so much. Not you, Room 21. I'm teaching them at the moment. You're cool. It's fine. I'm not talking about you. And so I think that there's obviously different ways that you can do it. The way that I fund my music is by working this other job.
Yeah, and a lot of people do that.
Yeah,
That's super common. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I really care about. I love being a teacher and I love doing that. But a lot of it goes back into the music, really. And I know that in a lot of ways I'm really fortunate to have a revenue stream at all while I'm doing music.
Totally.
So I can be passionate about something when I get home from school.
Sometimes that is actually, whether we like it or not, sometimes that does help with having a sustainable music career, is actually also having a side pursuit that funds that career. And there's obviously ways that you can not per se monetize, but like sort of make the most of what you're doing musically.
Yeah.
But it is really helpful, especially when you're getting started, to have something that can sort of fund. It's like a startup fund almost, at least to sort of get you off the ground and till maybe your music can sort of generate some income for itself.
Yeah. So for me, I think even the fact that certain aspects and different avenues in my music do actually make money. I've never been in the position to consider that like an income, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Because it'll be like, heaps of money this month, nothing for the next 2 months.
Sure.
And then like,
reliable.
just waiting for things to come around. And part of that as well is because I'm not doing music on its own all the time.
Right.
Yeah, but as well, part of that is just an inherent part of the volatility of doing music for money or doing music for an income.
Yeah.
And so thankfully there are different things out there that can help musicians. But even those aren't really like a surefire thing.
Yeah, that's very true. There obviously are certain things that you can do to build up your music basically being a self-employed person. Like signing up to APRA and
Sure.
Definitely do that.
We can talk a bit more about that soon, and like keeping your business documents in check and basically running your self-employed person as a business and your music as a business, and being smart about budgeting and what money is going towards the business to make that maybe not even profitable, but like just more manageable.
Like the word sustainable that
yes,
Koen used
exactly.
at the beginning. I think that's a really healthy starting point. Like if you're wanting to start a career in music, I would recommend not aiming to be filthy rich as your first step. I think just being able to have something that's sustainable is really important. Like on the money side of things, for me personally, like my goals are even less than that. But if you are wanting to have a career in music that includes music being your income, then I think finding something sustainable is a good first goal. Yeah. Rather than finding something profitable.
Yeah.
Or
It's
something.
probably a more realistic approach, especially in the earlier stages, or well, who knows how long that goes on for, because it's always kind of a gamble to make it as an artist. You know what I mean? Like that's it's such a, like you say, like filthy rich is a pretty far away goal, But if we are talking about money, it would be good to sort of mention the different revenue streams for an artist that maybe, people at home sort of thing, or in the car or wherever you are listening, don't know about yet. And this is, of course, New Zealand focused.
And it's more to help you sort of break even on things, potentially.
Sure, that's kind of like a good
it's a good
goal,
place to
because
start.
maybe then it's like a sustainable thing.
Yeah.
You can keep doing it if you're
I think
breaking
so.
even.
What would you say? Do you have any things that you know about now or have found out about over the last few years that really help make things more sustainable for you?
I think closest to a surefire thing is like to start a covers band and learn how to play Sweet Caroline.
Oh yeah. And so many other tunes, right? Like
I have a few musicians who would take great offense to that that advice, but that's pretty close to being a surefire thing.
Yeah.
So I suppose that like doing those gigs that pay the bills, covers gigs, weddings, and birthdays, that kind of stuff is it's a world. It's a whole world. It's its own industry.
Yeah, for sure.
It is, totally.
Yeah, but I think that for me, I would love to see people making a living more out of their own music. And so there's definitely avenues for how you would do that. Like you get royalties from recordings.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, that's primarily through APRA.
Yeah.
And you can sign up for APRA.
Yeah.
As soon as you have any piece of music that's on any song that's on a streaming platform.
Doesn't
or
even
anything
need
like
to be on a streaming platform.
Really?
Yeah. For years and years and years before I
Totally.
released music, I used to play cover gigs at restaurants, and I'd play like 50% covers and 50% originals, and you
Sneak them
just
in there.
register them with APRA. And that's honestly like a decent paycheck. If you're playing
No
few hour
way.
cover gigs
absolutely.
a month, in a way, it's not surefire because it depends on how many gigs you play. But if you are playing gigs, you're gonna get royalties for them.
In a way, if
that
you're
makes sense.
not logging the gigs with APRA, so it's
Yes, okay,
it's
true.
so
You
easy,
need,
right?
You do
Because
need to log them. Yeah.
right, so you play the gig, you go to your app. They've got a fantastic phone app now. Actually, it's super
it's
easy
very
to just
good,
like, I played the exact same playlist as I did last week because I played at the same venue. I play there every week. I do a cover set and I sneak in 5 originals. Those 5 originals are going to give you, I think it's like sort of $2.30 each, depending. That's like an average because that's kind of like per how long the song is.
I'm trying to run the maths in my head. It's terrible that I've only just figured this out.
Don't quote me on that, of course. It's anyway, they give you, a small sum per song, but you do whatever, like 2 gigs a month, or maybe you're gigging loads and you're doing sort of 5 or 6 gigs a month or something along those lines. And over the year, that's going to stack up.
Yeah, and basically, just for anyone that doesn't know the way that APRA works, it's super easy to sign up to online. You just fill out a form, put in your details. It takes like 5 minutes, and some of the questions can be a little bit complex, but just give them a call if you're stuck, or flick us a message. It's pretty easy.
It's super easy. And even if you have a new song that you've written and you've given it a name and you play it for the first time at a gig or something to trial it out, that counts.
Yeah.
You're
You're talking to me.
You're just like, like it's so surprised. Like I was so surprised to find this out. But yeah, you write the song, you log it with APRA, you play it live, and you get paid for it.
And you don't need a lot to log it with APRA. It's literally like
How
the
long
name of the song,
is.
how long the song is, and like for anyone, I remember like being like, I don't know how long my song is. It doesn't have to be like to the point second accurate. Just a rough
It's
estimate.
3-ish
If you
minutes.
record it on your phone, you can get a rough estimate of how long it is. And then you have to depending on where you play it, like the more legit the venue, the easier it is, because if you're playing in your mum's backyard, it might not really register that as a
of course, but
valid
yeah.
location. But most restaurants and everything are easy, and then you just add you have to add the songs first, so registering the songs with APRA, and then when you play a gig, you submit what's called a performance report, where you basically say where you performed and how many songs you performed, and submit that, and then months later, you just get some money in your bank account.
And I guess what you're talking about is the recording royalties. So whenever it gets played, by obviously Spotify is maybe not paying you too much, but like if restaurants are playing it, if Air New Zealand puts it in their planes, and you know, etc., then it's either I think APRA or Recorded Music New Zealand that pays that out to you. And the cool thing with APRA is you may have written that song ages ago and you've already been getting money from those performances, but now that you've released the song as well, you have what's it, an IRSC or an ISRC? I always thought
ISRC, I think.
Yeah, it's one of them. But you have a code that you slap onto the recording of the song, and every time the song gets recognized,
and you add that
same
to
as
APRA, so that now it knows
same
it's
as
the
like
same
Shazam
song.
works, I guess. As soon as that song gets picked up by the algorithms, APRA goes, sweet, that's X amount of money to the artist.
That's right. And I suppose like as like a writer, recording artist, that's the kind of thing that I see a lot more often.
Yes.
Not on the pub circuit.
Yeah. It definitely, if you're not performing your own music, then having it on APRA before it's released is probably not going to do much, because no one else is going to be playing it if it's not released yet. So it's mainly just a tip if you're doing live gigs before you've released music, which like, you know, a good percentage of people do in some capacity.
Now I'm thinking though, whenever I play a gig, I'm just going to play my songs and covers of songs that I've also written.
Yes. You should totally do that. That you've got
Double
credits on.
dipping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, so depending on the gig, like, so if you're playing in the back of a restaurant, nobody knows like what you're playing. They just want to hear some nice little tunes.
Just some nice tunes. If you've got nice songs, you're in luck.
It's
a good start.
On top of APRA and Recorded Music NZ, there's a couple of other things that are really good to check out. Some of these things cost money to sign up to, but they're well worthwhile doing if you are making music consistently and thinking of making music your career. And these things are Independent Music New Zealand.
They run a fantastic newsletter, actually. They the newsletter alone is already great. And of course, they organize Going Global and Going Local. Gosh, what else do they do? Tape Music Prize, that's them.
Oh, true.
They do quite a few things.
Lots of cool
They do quite
events.
a few things here. And they kind of represent the independent musicians in New Zealand.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
And then there's the Music Managers Forum, which you, like, despite the name, you don't have to be managing somebody else. You can be managing yourself. Which a lot of independent artists are doing.
Yeah.
And they provide a lot of advice.
Loads of great mentors on it.
Loads of great mentors. I think you can get a certain amount of like free mentoring sessions when you sign up.
Yeah, and they run similar to Independent New Zealand, who runs Going Global and Going Local and those kind of like seminar things. They run fantastic seminars and stuff like that, like the Independent Music Month like wrap up thing. They're always involved in that.
And it's actually like the NZ Music Month Summit, for example, is sort of like a really cool event to go to. If you've listened to these podcasts, you're like, okay, cool. Like
I'm taking notes. I'm learning things.
Yeah, I've got the foundations. Okay, like now I've learned so much from the Ins and Outs podcast. I want to tour globally.
Yeah.
And then you should go regardless. It's really interesting. But yeah, just really good. I think their main port of call is advice and just sharing information.
Yeah, they do a couple of seminar type things, like one of their big ones definitely is this sort of speed dating event thing with festival managers, festival organizers. So it's like getting to know the festival, who runs this festival, and what should you do in this application. So super handy resources. And I mean, gosh, this we're quite lucky in New Zealand
to have
with
these things.
How many organizations there are that are supporting the industry.
But the reality is that if you don't know about these things, you just don't know about them.
Yeah, you miss out.
So go and Google them and inquire a bit further.
Yeah.
And the last one is the Music Producers Guild, which is a little bit more targeted to if you are a producer in the scene, not so much if you are just writing music.
And of course, Emily in episode 1 at the end of episode
Did a
1,
little spiel on
kind
that.
of has a little, little bio on there, what they do.
Yeah. But those are the main ones. I'm sure there's more that we don't know about yet. So
Yeah, gosh.
drop any in the comments if you know any that we don't. Speaking of all those things that if you sign up to, you might potentially get some dollars in your bank account. Let's talk about how you as an individual can keep track of your own finances in a smart way to sort of, I don't know, if you're a self-employed person, there's all these little things like taxes and tax returns and, oh my gosh, all the stuff that we wish we learned in school. Yeah, but those things are sometimes tricky to like navigate and deal with, but are very real as soon as you start actually making any money, you know, obviously if you're making.
And you kind of want to have these things, of course, set up before sums of money start appearing in your bank account.
Yeah, like don't get too anxious if you've played a couple cover gigs, like they're not going to come for you. But if you're playing a cover gig every month or a cover gig every week, you probably want to be keeping track of your expenses and stuff. And this is something that I've been like wildly learning over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's been pretty mind-blowing over the last few years. Hey, like the sort of tips and tricks of the trade.
But basics. I mean, you must be keeping track of your finances, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on both sides of it. I've been on both sides of it where the first few years didn't keep track at all.
Yeah.
And then what usually happens is that it gets around to the time for all my mates getting tax returns, and I get this massive bill that's just like, hey, you haven't paid any taxes for your side business in music, and we know about all of it, and here's how much it is. I'm like,
oh no. Where did this come from? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so that would... I learned front-footing that is a better way to do it, where you kind of you set aside. I didn't actually do it that seriously. I just did kind of near the maximum amount.
Yeah.
And then it would get to the end of the year. They'd say, "This is the bill," and I'd be like, "Oh, sweet! I do actually have
you put money aside
that and more."
Yeah.
You know? We're quite fortunate in New Zealand. I know there's a friend of mine over in LA at the moment, and they have to do all their taxes by hand, all on their own. It doesn't happen automatically like it does over here.
Yeah.
And obviously sometimes like IRD gets it wrong. Yeah. I wouldn't know, but I know that they do get it wrong. But for me, at least, it's the getting into the habit of a certain percentage of what I get paid.
Yeah.
Is always set aside.
Yeah.
And with certain gigs that I do, I'll often do the tax all on their side.
Yes, yeah.
You know, withholding tax is 20%.
Stuff, yeah.
And what happens is that if that percentage that I've paid the tax on their side is too high, then that just comes out of my tax bill at the end of the year.
Yeah.
It kind of all balances out. Balances out at the end of the tax year.
Do you keep track of your expenses for your business and log all that?
Yeah, I've got an Excel spreadsheet, quite an involved Excel spreadsheet that's color coded.
It's literally the key, isn't it?
Love the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Man.
Key to my heart is color coding everything.
Yeah.
And that for me is just help things to make sense. Especially seeing as quite a lot of my income from my first job goes into music. And it helps to keep those things separate.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like I actually am buying this for my music.
Yes.
You know?
You're not just like buying a random thing.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as like buying a toy or
it's an investment in your company essentially.
Or at least that's how I think about it. That's how I visualize it in my head. And it means that the kind of the decision making is easier after that.
Yeah, and actually, one thing that I was fascinated to learn in the last couple of years is that when you do buy something as an expense for your business, it actually decreases the amount of tax that you have to pay
That's right.
at the end of the year, which was so mind-boggling to me. It took me a while to like wrap my head around. But that to me is what like that is really what becomes worth. Like why tracking your expenses becomes really worth it.
Absolutely.
Because you get this like peace of mind, like you say, you're like, okay, I know what's happening with what I'm doing with my music, what I'm earning and what I'm spending, which is just good to know. But at the same time, you can then keep track of your expenses, and at the end of the year, if you've bought a bunch more stuff and you spent, I don't know, $1,000 on your business, you can say to IRD at the end of the year, like,
Actually, I
didn't earn $10,000. I spent $1,000 on my business, so I only earned $9,000. And then they go, oh, sorry,
Absolutely.
we were going to make you pay this much tax, but now we'll make you pay less tax. And that's always nice. And so I think to me, because people are probably going to be spending money on their business regardless, whether they know they are or not. But do keep track of it, because you can pay less tax if you just write it down somewhere. And
Totally.
Absolutely.
keeps peace of mind.
Fuel is a big one as well.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to Google it? Is that like too unprofessional for this?
No, there's like a...
There's a number,
There's
right?
a number, And every year it changes as well.
And
but it's really easy to find as well, because actually what I've found in New Zealand is the IRD is incredibly helpful. At the end of the tax year, you just go like, oh, okay, well, I've driven this amount of kilometers. I've driven this distance. I have to pop it in the formula that they provide for me, which changes every year, or updates every year rather than changes. It doesn't do a backflip, but it just updates with the new number, right? So it's like, this year, because fuel prices increased, you can pop this new number in your formula, and you'll get a little bit more back because you spent more on. And it's kind of like what an average car uses in fuel costs. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Inland Revenue Department, fuel vehicle expenses.
Yes.
Bring it on.
That's the one.
Because it's more than I expected. It's more than just the fuel.
Yes.
Because it's supposed to take into account like the wear and tear on your car, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it really adds up. It really adds up.
Yeah.
Especially for me, I play gigs all over the North Island. And so, I'll drive down to Tauranga and back. And like all of those Ks count.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'll be doing festivals over the summer.
Yeah.
Driving from Auckland to all these places like Raglan and the Coromandel and Tauranga again.
Yeah.
But like these Ks, they all count.
Yeah.
It really
just
adds
keep
up.
track of it.
Yeah.
You what's that app that you can like see how many kilometers it's taken you?
Road Trip is pretty good
Road
for
Trip's
that.
pretty good. Download
Road
that app,
Trip's
and
really
it's
good.
super easy. You can put in your number plate, and it
It's
calculates how
literally
much
a
to
number plate. It tells you what kind
your
of
car
what
to
your
get to A to B and back.
what your sort of like average cost is per kilometer or something like that.
Yeah.
It's Road Trip's pretty cool. And then actually speaking of apps, I use a spreadsheet like you do, which I find really awesome, because exactly what you're saying, peace of mind. You see exactly how much you're earning that year, or how much this quarter or whatever, how far you're into the year. Like, okay, I've earned like this, and last year at this point in time, like in the financial year, I earned about this much. So that's kind of, you can compare. And I've spent about this much, and I've driven about this far, and it's good to just kind of every day tweak away at it or whatever. But you use
I use Henry.
Henry.
Which is the
Which
app. Yeah.
is super cool. It's just for self-employed Kiwis, HNRY, and they basically do it all for you. Yes, I did it myself for the first year, and it is really beneficial to understand how to do it yourself.
Yes.
But if you're someone that like is short on time, gets overwhelmed by spreadsheets, doesn't trust themselves to calculate things correctly, which I know there's a lot of people out there like that. Henry is an app that you can download, and I won't even explain it in detail because they explain it brilliantly on their platform.
They do.
And you still need to log all your expenses and stuff, but they file your tax return for you. They'll tell you whether your expense is valid as a business expense or not.
And you can send invoices through.
You invoice through Henry and get paid through Henry. So Henry are like joint with ASB, so you get a new sort of bank account number and any payment, and then it's important that the person who's paying you pays you into that account number, and then Henry pays tax and then gives that money to you. So then the money that's in your bank account is your money. It's the money.
So whereas with a spreadsheet, you're kind of putting that money aside for the end of the year when you have to pay that tax.
Yeah.
This kind of happens as you get the money,
Yeah,
right?
and then at the end of the year, they file your tax return, and you might still get a return. Like, okay, we overcalculated your tax. Here's a couple $100.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that for peace of mind, because depending on how much money you're earning, if you are earning, sadly I'm not, but if you are earning a lot of money and you are doing it yourself, it can start to get a bit worrisome of whether you're doing things correctly, and you don't want IRD to call you up and you've done things wrong. So I don't know. I love it, and I think it's worth a shout out because they're doing a cool thing.
Totally. Aside from that, I do really recommend getting familiar with spreadsheets because
Yes,
if you're
in general.
planning a tour or if you're budgeting anything, if you're releasing maybe a single that's going to surprise you about like, oh, okay, actually I need to pay a producer or I need to pay a mix engineer, master engineer, I need to pay for promo, I need to pay for advertisement. Or maybe it's a whole EP, suddenly that's 5 times the amount or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a tour, you're taking so many things into account, like, okay, how much is the fuel going to cost? And getting familiar with spreadsheets, it can seem daunting, I know.
It is daunting.
But
yeah.
just take a little crash course. And once you've got it, man, you've got it. Like,
Yeah, and you don't
know how
actually
to-
need
oh,
a lot to get to a
No.
basic level. If that, you can be an absolute spreadsheet wizard and be able to do these crazy formulas, but in a basic sense, you don't need a lot
No.
to have a solid foundational budget. And it really will help you with everything. Knowing how to make
of course,
a good
what it will
spreadsheet.
do is you'll see things coming. You'll see, okay, I'm booking a venue in Wellington. It's going to cost me this much. Maybe I should put the price tickets at this much instead of maybe what I had in mind. Like maybe instead of $10, I'm going to make it $15 or $20.
Yeah.
And actually, I've seen a lot of other bands sort of sell them for $20. So I can probably do that.
Yeah.
It's the type of thing where like I would actually recommend like getting into the numbers because it helps you to think about all of the different parts of your music career that actually are sneakily expensive.
Yes.
You're thinking about we're in Auckland at the moment. You want to play a gig in Wellington and you're saying like, oh yeah, the venue's $50. Oh yeah, I only have to sell 10 tickets, $5 a pop. And you're just like, oh wait, no, actually that's like several $100s of fuel if I'm going to drive.
Yeah.
Accommodation
Which is
for
why-
your band,
Road
booking
trip,
support acts, all those things. I mean, support acts, it depends on how you run your gig. If you run your gig by splitting it 3 ways between the 3 acts that are playing, that's a lot easier, right? Because then it's not. But if you are booking support slots and you're booking acts that say like, yeah, we'll open for you, it will cost you $200 to $300 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's why what road trip is really good for is in advance, you can go, okay, this is my car and this is exactly how much it will cost me to get to Wellington and back. So you're not surprised at the end, like, that was expensive.
You can just put that in your expenses and see it coming. And that's the thing, like even before you're booking the venue, it's like, hey, is this going to be possible? Like, can I play a show on the other side of the country?
Yeah.
Or maybe should I play a few more support slots around Auckland and get a bit more of an audience that I will then... I can then expect to sell enough tickets to, or maybe I save up from, say, what you're doing. I have a sort of main income that's going to fund this tour or that's going to fund this release because money doesn't just appear out of thin air. And we're in music not for the money, and it takes a long time before that funds itself, before you break even, before it's that sustainable self-funding system.
Yeah. The thing with like, traveling to perform, it's just that I remember my first few years, a friend of mine would say like, oh, you can do a house gig down here in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And I'd say, yeah, sweet as, like, and in my mind, I just got this idea, free. Like it's free.
Yeah.
And then it's not until I get to like, I'm flying down there and I'm realizing like, I've got nothing in my bank account because I had to buy tickets. I had to, think of somewhere to stay. And now I'm having to buy food when I'm down there.
Yeah.
All of these kind of things that just appear sneakily. But now, because I've been keeping track of all that stuff for so long personally, there are very few of these little sneaky expenses that can catch up with me. So I can say, a friend of mine says, you can play here for free, you can stay here for free. And I'm like, good start, but it's still going to cost this, and these are the things I have to actually consider.
Like surprised in a bad way. Because we're talking about budgeting and keeping track of things and not being surprised.
Yeah.
And another reason that it's really good to be able to know how to make a spreadsheet and budget is funding. Because
Yes.
if there's
absolutely.
anywhere that money's going to appear out of thin air from, it's probably from funding.
Beautiful
But
thin
it's
air.
still not really thin air in a way, because the application process can be quite time consuming sometimes.
In a
And
good way, of course,
yes,
right? Yeah.
it's a time consuming process that you're going to have to do regardless of whether you actually get the funding for the project that you're doing or not, because
Yeah.
you have to complete the same thought process. But at the same time, in order to apply for the funding, which, us musicians love to be last minute, so we're like, sick, funding due tomorrow, and then you realise that you have to have an intensive budget planned out, which I wouldn't recommend. But if you know how to make a budget and you know sort of roughly how these things are going to cost and how to do that, that becomes much less stressful.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
totally.
I just think that's a good segue, because funding is something that you might not get because it can be quite competitive, but it's worth applying
Totally.
for.
Yeah.
Because if you do get it, it can really be an amazing thing.
It can literally cut the cost of your tour in half.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to have funding in New Zealand. Not a lot of countries have funding available.
Thank you, Sir Dave Dobbin.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely, although I must just side note, is that don't rely on funding.
Yes.
Do figure out how to do it, how to make things break even, and, figure it all out yourself, because
that's kind of segueing back into that topic of sustainability.
sustainability. Yeah. But if you are applying to funding, NZ single funding or tour funding, I'm not sure if that will continue with NZ Music Commission,
I know that they're
but they're working on it.
keen to
Yeah.
and working on it to not revive, to have that for
Yeah.
another year or so.
But I think most applications are the same in the sense that they will ask your details and a few specific questions about what you want to do with the funding, and then ask for a budget. And they usually have pretty good templates to fill out, but
Yeah.
you still need to do the research and figure out how much your gas is going to cost and how much your accommodation and all of those things are going to cost. So it's a good skill to have. Honestly, even if you're not in music, I'm sure that everyone uses a good spreadsheet.
Totally.
I'm actually so glad that we have something like those funding rounds that happen in New Zealand, and even that kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that radios and TV in New Zealand is rewarded for playing a certain percentage of Kiwi music. It just kind of helps the New Zealand music scene to remain relevant. Yeah, because obviously there's a part of it that we're competing against America that has infinite money in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's great that there is actually that support on a societal level.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
government, everyone's money pulled together. This little fraction of it actually that does go to
the
people
arts.
who are making music in New Zealand. And there's you're right. There's a lot of different ones. There's the singles, NZ single, and there's the tour one, which is still going. I hope
This tour, there's also there's national tour, which is just ran out, but that they're hopefully reviving. And then there's of course Outward Sound, so that's overseas tours, and then there's a massive one, Creative New Zealand, which is not just music, so that's for pretty much all the arts. So that's even more competitive.
they do creatives in schools, which is so cool.
So they do a lot of cool stuff, man. And that's the thing, because all these cool things happen, even this podcast
I was literally going to say that.
in New Zealand for New Zealand musicians and for New Zealand art professionals that otherwise maybe wouldn't happen,
Yeah.
And in schools and everywhere, it's just really fostering the industry, which is so dope.
I like to think of it in the way that not per se that it makes things happen that wouldn't otherwise happen, but it makes these projects viable career options when there's funding in it. Because say this podcast, for example, I'd like to think we'd still be doing this podcast, but if we didn't have funding, we might not be able to put our events on for free.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes,
You don't get to have dinner after you.
Who would take you out to a nice restaurant? No.
But it's just things like that. It makes it more accessible for
Absolutely. Yeah.
for people.
Absolutely.
When we can make things free and, pay the people involved a small amount to do the thing rather than just trying to create time out of nowhere. So,
and I think it's really cool to see how up to date the funding is staying constantly. Especially after COVID, like there was a really quite quick response to reviving
the music scene, the
scene that
creative
just completely went stagnant, right? Because no one could play, no one could tour, no one could go into studios, no one could do anything. And straight away there was that, okay, let's kick back into it and let's kick back into it hard. And then there's like Ends in an Air just did a Pan Asian fund as well for like their singles.
So
like
cool.
that's epic, man. And the coolest thing is seeing that there's more than 100 people, 100 musicians that are A, eligible for it, and B, actually apply for it. Right? That's like so cool to see.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's a shame that
They didn't all get
it's
it,
competitive.
Yeah.
But of course it's got to be. But like that's so cool that
That's
there's
just the reality of it all.
yeah.
But having a good budget will help you stick out.
Yes. Yeah.
It is really true. Like, you need to have your ducks in a row in order to apply for this funding because they want to see that you,
Of course, if you can prove that,
understand how to put on whatever project you're putting on. I'd like to move into to like finish off this podcast because sustainability to me is like, yes, making things financially sustainable is really awesome. But also there's an aspect of doing music as a career that needs to be sustainable for your well-being.
Yeah, tag me in.
And so, tagging you in. Yeah, go for it.
No, so this is something that I talk to my friends about quite a bit. This isn't my words. This is the scientific consensus, right? There's a link between being an artist and having poor mental health. And so for me, that's something that I really, really care about is that musicians are looking after themselves in ways that are more than just financial. For me, I think that something I've really been advocating for at the moment is finding your allies. And I've chosen that word really carefully because I'm not asking people to find fans or to, find, their auntie who would always love the music no matter what.
Yeah.
Sure.
But finding people who are in a similar position, musicians in the same boat, struggling artists of any kind, who can understand what you're going through in a meaningful way, and just like encouraging one another. I think it's difficult to get how valuable that is, but it's extremely valuable to me in my music career, and I really advocate it for people who are trying to create this sustainable career, because it's the type of thing that fans are cool to have because they buy your tickets, but deep down everybody's still a human, even a famous musician, even a failing musician, a struggling musician, and they need supporters. They need people to get alongside them. And
I really like what you're saying. Find someone, or not someone. Find people who are in the same boat. Because that understanding, like you say, is invaluable. Being able to say like, hey man, like, do you ever get that feeling of like, my song didn't perform so well when I released it? It's a tough feeling. How do you navigate that? And they'll say like, oh, actually, I've been thinking the same thing. And you don't feel so alone because that's, it can be such an isolating career, right?
Yeah, and I think part of it is to do with the fact that that when you're in the music business, there's a big performative aspect of it that's not just on stage.
Oh God, yeah.
you're kind of selling yourself out in a way to become more of a product than a person.
Definitely.
But that's why I think it's just so important to have those people in your life who will always know you first as a person or as an equal.
And then
Before they know you as a brand or as a famous person, that kind of stuff, or as an artist, you know. Because those are the people who really look after you, you know. And then encouraging people as well, like to try and encourage people to just like be a bit more real at times. Obviously you've got to, you know, make your TikToks where you put on a voice, and you've got to, you know, you've got to write the funny song, and you've got to practice the things that you say in between, like those kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is fine, but just being able to differentiate between when you're doing that and the way that you portray yourself and the way you let people know yourself in that space, and then having this other more personal space where people can actually know you face to face, like on an equal footing.
It's almost like having the importance of having an artist identity that's, even if it's like based off you as a person and isn't someone completely different like Sia or Lady Gaga or something like that. Like even if it isn't that far removed from who you are as a person, but still being able to distinguish what is your artist identity and what is yourself. Because it can be exhausting when everything you go to, you have to present yourself in a certain way, because everybody that you meet, you know, New Zealand's such a small world, and it can be so anxiety and like I can be socially anxious sometimes going to events and being like, you know, if you say something wrong or do something wrong, you know what I mean? It feels sometimes like the weight of the world is on every interaction in terms of like the way that you need to act and be. But it is so important to remember that you don't need to be like that around everybody, and to be able to distinguish when you're going to go to an industry event or hop up on stage and sort of become your artist identity, and when you step off and talk to your bandmates or the people who came out to your show to just sort of be yourself.
I've been trying to tap way more into the being yourself aspect on stage as well, or on camera, or you know, because it's, if we're talking sustainability, like there's only like I totally hear what you know what you're saying. Like sometimes you are doing those videos where you are putting on a voice or kind of like putting on a mask or a face, but doing this podcast in front of a camera, I can totally be myself, and people can get to know me, and I don't care if people get to know me like me, you know, like it means that I can stay me, and people can get to know me and take that on as they like. If they like what I'm saying, that's great. If they don't, that's cool too. Like, you know, like, and I mean, that's, to me, that's sustainable, right? Yeah. But then also there's a scary part of that where people want to have privacy as well, and I totally understand that as well.
And there's still obviously an extent to that. Like, you know, you are a section of yourself.
Absolutely.
Authentically.
You're totally right.
You obviously, regardless of what you do, it's the same as, say you're a really famous person, you go on an interview on a big TV show. You can still be authentically yourself, but you're probably going to be a small section of yourself because you're, depending on who you are, you know, there's certain private details that Harry Styles just cannot talk about on the internet.
Sure. And like, maybe he can't talk about it because it's not interesting to anybody. No, that's the... Well, I wasn't meaning that, like, you know, people are fake on stage or that kind of thing. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, like, it's to be careful of, like, how much you believe that people know you genuinely. You know, there are people, even if you're yourself all the time, there are people who have only seen you on the podcast, or there's people who've only seen you on stage, and they know, like Jem said, they know that real part of you. But there are I would hope there's people who know you better than that.
Totally.
And it's just to like. Yeah, and like and never sell those people short, because
getting those allies around you and really letting them know, like, hey, you mean a lot to me in my life. Like that's I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, my allies.
Yes,
you mean a lot to me in my life.
I think that is really important, finding people in the same circle. Do you have any like tips on if someone's like at home being like, okay, that's cool, but I don't know how to find my allies. Do you have any, like, how did you find your allies in life? Are they friends from way back or?
Interestingly, I find that writing with people is this really interesting dynamic because we're making the song together, even though it's not my song. And so for me, with some of the people that I write with, we've got a little bit of that, you know, where they would know me better than, you know, someone who's seen me perform.
Yeah.
But as well, there are a few people that I've just met through either opening for them or like going to gigs smaller venues and meeting them and talked to them in a way that's not just like, cool gig, I like the gig, you know, which is nice. I love when people say that to me, but just like
being more vulnerable with people.
Yeah, like maybe we've wound up at a bar or something after with all the opening acts, and you know, we talked for a few hours, which is well past the point where you're talking about like cool gig, great song, you know. And you start talking about things like, oh yeah, like do you sometimes feel like your music's not going anywhere?
Yeah.
Or like do you sometimes worry that you're wasting your time? Like those kind of conversations really create opportunities to meet people who might be your ally. It's not a surefire thing, not a guarantee. But a lot of my allies were met in those kind of contexts.
Yeah.
And as well, there's some people in my life who don't care. Careful wording. Okay.
Yeah.
They don't care about me because of my music.
Yes.
I see.
They care about you because of who you are.
0% of the reason why they care for me is for my music.
Yeah.
Though they do love my music, you know, like people like I don't know, my mum. Yeah, and there's those kind of people that I they will know me in a way that a fan couldn't know me.
Yes.
Or that they will know me in a way that even a bandmate might not be able to know me. Though I'm very close with some of my bandmates. And I think for me it's the fact that those people have always been there. I've been really fortunate to already know those people, but it's just to notice them, you know, and to look for them and acknowledge them. I think smaller gigs are a good spot if you don't have anybody like that.
You can almost imagine like, where would I find people going through what I'm going through? And at smaller gigs, there probably are just going to be a lot of like-minded people who are going through similar things to you.
Yes, who could I probably relate to?
Yeah, definitely.
As well, I think that there's something to be said for going and meeting people in a non-musical context.
Yes, very
and
important.
Having their first interaction with you be not as a musician.
Yes.
Fascinating, really fascinating. You know?
I agree. Sometimes I feel like to me that's come like later. Like I was like, oh my God, it's so fun to meet more musicians. And after a while I was like, I kind of just want some like friends that aren't attached.
Some mates
to
I can play football
do.
with or something.
I want someone to introduce me and say like, this is Ngariki, he's a really good cook.
Yeah.
It's like,
brilliant.
It's because someone said that about me the other day, and I was just like,
oh my God.
The first time I've been called something other than a musician or a muso, you know,
It's
like, oh, you really know me in a different way.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah. Finding your allies. I think that is my favorite theme of today.
Finding your
obviously
people.
It's all learn how to make a good spreadsheet and find your allies.
What's the title going to be? Spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets and allies. And then there's obviously, I feel like we've just touched the surface in some ways. There's obviously lots more that you can do to be sustainable. Don't forget about having a work-life balance. Be kind on yourself. Eat. We actually do have a episode with Calvin. He looks after the well-being of musicians. He's got some fancy title that I can't remember, but you'll see when the episode comes out. Anyway, we extend this conversation about mental health and well-being. So we'll talk a lot more in depth about looking after yourself as an artist. And the last thing I wanted to mention, sorry, just blah, blah, blah. is there are obviously, you get to a certain point in your career of being an independent artist where you might find that it's more sustainable to reach out to people for support with your projects. That might not feel like the most financially sustainable thing to do at some point. But if you are pursuing music as a career,
that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? If you are organizing tours yourself, if you're planning releases yourself, like there's an
You can only wear
extent to
so
how
many
much you
hats.
can do. Exactly. And offloading some of that to trusted peers or people in the industry who have that experience and know who to send your song to, or know which venue you would perform well in, or you know what tour to book in this stage of your career. Like that knowledge is hard to get unless you kind of go the hard way and find it out the hard way, and you go like, well, I'm not playing that venue again. I didn't sell out, like I didn't sell half of the tickets, etc. And having people in your team that do know that stuff is invaluable.
That could look like getting a booking agent, getting a manager, outsourcing your PR.
Yes.
Lots of little things. But I
All
think
that
it's
good
just
stuff.
important to mention that doing everything yourself is really awesome, and we Kiwis just love the DIY.
Yeah.
But
And
there
in
gets
an
to a
early
point
stage
where
of a career, that like a music career, totally makes sense. Like I can completely understand, and it's actually good doing that for a while
And
because you
understanding
do get that understanding of like, oh, okay, this is probably how much I should pay for a PR campaign, or this is how much I should give away to a booking agent, sort of thing.
Yeah, but sometimes the not the most sustainable financial option can sometimes be what's more sustainable for your mental health.
Yeah.
So you do have to keep that in mind.
How are you going to keep doing this?
How are you
kind of
gonna?
thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's been a fun
That
conversation.
about wraps it up, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's, like you're saying, we're scratching the surface. There's so many tips and tricks that you can do in the financial world of the arts, whether that's music or, there's so many avenues. But yes, hopefully that opens your ideas up and gets you thinking.
Are so confused and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to sign up to APRA or do any of these things.
Let us know.
We have an event coming up.
Yeah.
Or in the past, depending on when you listen to this podcast. But if it is coming up for you, come
It's
along.
free.
It's free.
We're running 4 free events over the next 4 weeks. Well, by the time this episode comes out, one will have already happened. But yes.
Alas, there's 3 more.
There's 3 more.
And one of those is a
And they're free.
workshop where we'll be going over some of these admin tasks, like signing up to APRA and learning how to write
how to get your budget set up so it actually functions like, oh, okay, I'm going to pay $200 here. That's going to weigh against, et cetera, et cetera.
all that good stuff. So check it out and come along.
Handy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ngariki, for the awesome kōrero.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Loved it.